Imagine an island that looks ordinary on the map, but holds thousands of stories too terrifying for the locals to speak aloud. Peace be upon you, dear friends blessed by God. Before I begin sharing the story above, I encourage you to write blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad. May these blessings serve as witnesses for us and help us receive his intercession on the Day of Judgment. Liking and subscribing to this channel greatly helps in spreading Islamic teachings and becomes an ongoing charity that benefits us even after we're gone, God willing.
The sky was dim as a small boat slowly sailed toward a silent island that stood proudly at the edge of the southern sea. Waves rolled quietly, as if guarding secrets long buried beneath the cliffs of Nusa Kambangan. The old wooden vessel carried a thin man dressed in a brown uniform, holding a small bag, his face etched with unease. His name was Wahyu, a young prison officer recently transferred from a small penitentiary in Sumedang to one of the oldest and most mysterious correctional facilities in Indonesia. He stood at the bow, staring at the towering stone walls rising in the distance. From afar, the island looked like a natural fortress. But as they drew closer, something felt off. It wasn't just the eerie silence or the musty smell drifting from the cliffs. It was the whispers he'd heard the night before at the Silicap dock. People avoided calling the island by name. They only referred to it as that place, or the eastern side. "Don't stare at the waves too long, son," said the boatman, an old man with a thin beard and hollow eyes. "The sea around here tends to change direction at night. You don't want to end up like the others." Wahyu ignored him, brushing it off as a fisherman's superstition. But as the boat inched closer, a weight began to press on his chest, like something unseen was trying to keep him from setting foot on the island. The small harbor greeted him in silence. No guards, no shouts of military command like he had imagined. Only two men in worn uniforms welcomed him briefly and took him in an old vehicle toward the northern side of the island, toward Lapas Batu, one of the highest security prisons in Southeast Asia. On the way, Wahyu watched the dense forest lining both sides of the road. Giant trees loomed, with roots crawling like snakes across the ground. In some areas, the road seemed untouched for years, overgrown with thick moss. "Are there still civilians living here?" Wahyu asked, glancing out the window. "There haven't been any for over 20 years, the driver replied curtly. "Why not?" "Because they all left." "Left for where?" The driver didn't answer. He simply turned to the rear-view mirror, locking eyes with Wahyu. His stare was blank, but deeply unsettling. This island isn't meant for ordinary people. Only the mentally strong can survive here. Wahyu swallowed hard. When he arrived at Lapas Batu, he was immediately introduced to Chief Basuki, a large man with a sharp, piercing gaze. "Here, you don't just guard the inmates," he said bluntly. "You also have to guard yourself." Wahyu began to adjust. His first few days were uneventful. He recorded inmate activities, patrolled at night, and slept in a small barack behind the prison. But on his first Thursday night, things started to change. Around 1 in the morning, he heard soft knocking from inside the wall of his room. Not from the door, from within the concrete wall itself. At first, he thought it might be a rat, but the pattern was too deliberate. 3 knocks. Silence. Then 3 more. And then it stopped. He stepped out with a flashlight, scanning the area around the barack. Nothing. The night air was salty and carried a strange metallic scent, like rusted iron or blood. The next day, Wahyu asked his senior colleagues, but they all acted like they hadn't heard anything. One of them, a man named Darman, finally whispered when Wahyu insisted, "If you hear knocks from the wall, don't respond. Don't look for where it's coming from. And whatever you do, never open the lower room behind the iron storage shed." Wahyu was stunned. He had no idea such a room even existed. That night, curiosity overwhelmed him. He snuck out of the barack and made his way to the iron storage building. Behind it, hidden behind an old fence and thick brush, he found a rusted iron door. There was no handle, but when he touched it, it felt warm, as if something living was trapped behind it. He leaned closer, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard a voice or something whispering from the other side. Wahyu stepped back, his eyes now fixed on a faint symbol etched into the metal. A single eye, surrounded by two concentric circles. He returned to the barack, but sleep never came. In his dream, he saw the island in flames. From the earth, hands emerged, clawing, trying to escape. And that voice, the one behind the door, was calling his name. The evening sky had begun to shift into a deep, bruised violet. The air grew heavy, as if holding back something waiting to break free from above. The pine branches atop the cliffs of Nusa Kambangan no longer stood still. Each leaf trembled violently, as though shaken by a fury rising from beneath the earth. In the distance, the sounds of crickets and forest insects suddenly vanished, leaving behind an unnatural silence. Pack Darsa stared straight at the gap between two limestone hills. He knew, just beyond those rocks lay the path into the Forbidden Valley. Yet he didn't move. His hand reached for the small kris tucked into his waistband. He was no ordinary man. He knew that stepping onto that path without the proper rites and blessings could cost not just his life, but his sanity. Suddenly, from between the trees, a figure cloaked in black emerged, towering and inhumanly tall, nearly 2 meters. Its face was covered completely by a pitch-black veil, revealing only 2 glowing reddish eyes beneath the twilight. The figure moved slowly, yet every step it took echoed deeply into the ground. It made no sound, but the aura radiating from it made Darsa's knees tremble. Kong Darsa hadn't expected the valley's guardian to appear so soon. He lowered his gaze in respect, tried to show reverence, but there was no reply. The figure simply raised an arm and pointed toward a small cave to the right of the path. That cave was known as the Soul's Thread. Legend said only those with a pure heart could pass through it without losing their mind. Cold sweat trickled down Darsa's temple. He knew that if he turned back now, he would fail his late father's final request. But if he moved forward and his spirit was too weak, his body might return without a soul. Whispering a prayer within, Kong Darsa stepped toward the narrow crevice at the base of the cliff. From the outside, it looked unremarkable, but the moment he stepped inside, all sunlight vanished. Total darkness. Even the sound of his own footsteps seemed swallowed by the earth. He reached out to touch the wall, only to feel the contours of a human face. He recoiled in shock. From within the pitch-black void, a breath echoed, rough, heavy, and terrifying. Darsa bit his tongue, forcing himself not to scream. The breathing drew closer, circling him. He knew this was the first trial. He had to endure. He had to keep walking. Outside the cave, the black-robed figure stood unmoving. The wind howled fiercely, leaves spinning in wild spirals. The sky had completely transformed. Above the cliffs, clouds swirled into a vortex. Forest birds fled, and small animals scurried from their burrows, rushing toward the shore. Nature itself seemed to sense that something unnatural was unfolding. Inside the tunnel, Kong Darsa moved slowly, feeling his way forward along the wall. The chill sank into his bones, yet sweat poured down his body from sheer tension. Every few meters, visions flickered in his mind. Phantoms from his past. The open-eyed face of his deceased mother, the friend he betrayed long ago in the market, the child he once saw crying in a dream. Each vision clawed at him, one by one. Then a whisper called his name from the end of the corridor. Darsa. The voice sounded like his mother's, yet deeper, echoing unnaturally. He froze. He knew no one else had entered with him, but the voice came again. Darsa. His legs trembled, but he pressed on. Suddenly, his foot stepped on something soft. Feeling around, he realized he stood atop a bed of wet frangipani flowers. From the ceiling above, clear droplets dripped onto his skin, but they burned hot. In his hand, he found a small stone. On its surface, an unfamiliar symbol was carved, a fusion of ancient Javanese script and serpentine curves. The tunnel trembled slightly. Ahead, a faint red glow appeared, like fire flickering within a fog. Kong Darsa quickened his pace. His heart pounded in his chest. Each step dragged him deeper into a living nightmare. At the end of the corridor, a chamber opened before him. The walls were built of massive black-green stones. In the center stood an ancient altar, atop which rested a human skull, with hollow eyes and a full set of teeth. Surrounding it were 5 clay bowls filled with thick, red liquid. Behind the altar stood an old woman with long white hair, that touched the ground. Her face was veiled with a sheer shawl, but behind it glowed eyes that burned like embers. "You have come, grandson of Rexadana," she whispered. Kong Darsa froze. He hadn't expected her to know his lineage. Rexadana, his grandfather, had vanished decades ago, accused of stealing a sacred relic from this very valley. The woman stepped forward, her voice echoing through the stone chamber. "Your soul is being tested, Darsa. If you can resist the whispers of the guardians, you will return with the true key. But if you waver, your blood will become the ink to continue their unfinished tale." Suddenly, a thick purple fog descended from the ceiling. Within the mist, grotesque shapes began to form. Faces without eyes, mouths stretched wide in endless screams, and voices that did not belong to this world. Kong Darsa's head spun. He tried to recite prayers silently, but his voice stuck in his throat. He dropped to his knees. The ground beneath him turned into a pool of blood, and small hands reached up, trying to pull him under. But amid the chaos, a child's voice called out, "Papa, come home, please." That voice made Darsa turn. In the mist, he saw his daughter's innocent face, holding a jasmine flower. Tears streamed down his face. He shut his eyes tight, gripped the sacred stone in his left hand, and shouted with all his might, "God is great." A blinding white light exploded from the stone in his palm. The purple fog parted. The monstrous apparitions vanished. The old woman stepped back, smiled faintly, and dissolved into mist. In his hand now lay a small golden dagger, its hilt wrapped with carvings of a coiled dragon. The passage behind him reopened. Light filtered in. Fresh air touched his skin once more. But as he stepped outside, the black-robed figure was already waiting. This time, the guardian removed its veil. What lay beneath was no human face. Its eyes were entirely black, its skin smooth like wood, but pulsing gently like a beating heart. "Welcome, bearer of the key. But your journey is far from over." Kong Darsa stood frozen. Above him, the skies swirled once more. The wind roared, and from the distance, a thunderous sound shook the island to its very core. The night wasn't over yet, but strange sounds had already begun to rise from deep within the forest. A cold wind crept to the bone. It carried with it a whispering hiss, words that had no meaning but echoed in the soul. Bayou and Yuta moved cautiously, their steps slow, their foreheads drenched in sweat despite the biting air. Their footsteps halted abruptly when the sound of gamelan music drifted in from afar. A soft Javanese melody floated through the mist, oddly gentle but enough to raise the hairs on their skin. Through the fog hanging between the trees, a golden-yellow glow appeared, like torches lighting up one by one, forming a path leading to a moss-covered boulder at the heart of the forest. Bayou gripped his bag tightly, his breath shallow. Yuta turned to him, his voice hoarse. "You see that too, right?" Bayou nodded silently. They walked slowly toward the light. Each step felt heavier, as though roots beneath the soil were pulling at their legs. When they reached the boulder, they froze. An ancient carving marked the stone surface, depicting a tall figure in a flowing robe with hollow eyes gazing toward the sky. Beside the stone stood an old wooden door, impossibly freestanding in the middle of the forest, with no building, no wall, just a door facing them. Suddenly, the door creaked open. The smell of incense poured out, thick and overpowering. A woman emerged slowly. Her face was wrinkled. Her long white hair flowed freely, but her eyes cut deep into anyone who dared meet them. "You've crossed the boundary of this land," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not everyone is allowed to be here." Yuta took a step back, but Bayou stepped forward, his voice steady. "We just want to know, is this really the site of an old prison? A place of executions? Where people were hidden and killed?" The woman fell silent, then gave a slight nod. "This is a land of redemption," she whispered. "Here, every sin was washed clean, for the last time, with blood." Bayou felt his legs weaken, but curiosity anchored him in place. The old woman opened the door wider, revealing a long, pitch-dark corridor that defied logic. Inside, she said, the walls have voices. Those who were tormented have not all returned. Suddenly, a scream tore through the corridor, the agonized cry of an old man, a woman sobbing, chains dragging across stone floors, Yet they were standing in a forest, with no building. Yuta placed a hand on Bayu's shoulder. Let's go. This is madness. But Bayu didn't move. I have to know. I have to see it. Bayu stepped forward, crossing through the door. Dim light swallowed him. Yuta reached out, but the door slammed shut on its own. The old woman turned to Yuta. Your friend is speaking to the past now. He'll only return if he truly wants to come home. Yuta didn't know what to do. The world around him shifted. Clouds swirled slowly above like a whirlpool. The forest air reeked of long dried blood. The gamelan music stopped. Silence fell. Inside the corridor, Bayu walked along the damp walls. The whispers were clearer now. Many voices, overlapping, desperate. Don't open that room. I was buried alive. Please take my body home. Bayu pressed his ear against the wall, and as if the wall had turned transparent, he saw things that shouldn't have existed. Emaciated figures herded by uniformed guards, beaten, stripped, dragged into execution chambers. Whips cracked. Screams filled the air. All of it just visions, but far too vivid to be imagined. He stumbled backward and stepped on something. A tattered book. He picked it up and opened the first page. Dozens of names written in red ink, like a death register. He didn't recognize any, until one name stopped his breath, a.k.a. Ramadan. His father's name. Bayu's heart pounded. He had never known anything about his father, only that he disappeared when Bayu was a baby. His mother had only said he was sent to Nusa Kambangan and never returned. Bayu clutched the book tightly. He followed the corridor, drawn forward by the list of names. The voices on the walls grew louder, as if they recognized the son of one of the missing. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a dark room. In the center stood a large wooden chair, an old execution seat. Seated in it was a man in a prison uniform, head bowed. Bayu approached slowly. Sir, Mr. Ike. The man lifted his head. Hollow eyes, pale skin. But that face, unmistakably the one from his mother's old photo. Bayu wept, choking on his words. I'm your son. The man gave a faint smile. You came to take me home? The room began to shake. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Chains rattled. The gamelan resumed, faster now, like the beat of war drums. Dark figures emerged along the walls, faceless, wrapped in shrouds. They began to close in around Bayu. His father stood. If you want to bring the truth home, you must leave before the door closes forever. Bayu turned. The corridor was still open, but the shrouded figures blocked the way. He would have to run. With a cry, Bayu sprinted through them. Screams erupted behind him. Agonized laughter, cries of vengeance, moans of unfulfilled forgiveness. Just as the door began to close, Bayu dove forward and tumbled out, landing hard on the forest floor. His breath was ragged, his whole body trembling. The door closed slowly behind him, then vanished entirely. All that remained was a mossy boulder, now bare, with no carving. Yuta ran to him. Are you insane? Where the hell did you go? You were gone. Bayu stared at the sky, clutching the notebook tightly. The red ink on the first page hadn't faded, and his father's name was still there. The sun was dipping low on the western horizon as the inmates and guards returned to the dock after the burial of Ki Gondo. Orange light pierced through the leaves, casting an eerie glow on tired faces still weighed down by unease. But something felt off. The sea breeze, usually soft and welcoming, now blew hot and heavy, like the breath of something watching them. The ferry that brought them now swayed erratically. The anchor chains clanged sharply, as if struck on purpose. Pak Roni, the head guard, shouted for everyone to board quickly, but whispers rippled among the prisoners. One of them, Iwan, looked up at the sky and murmured, "Why is the sky so red like blood?" Then Bagas, a guard at the front of the group, raised his hand and pointed toward the sea. That's not a reef, is it? Everyone turned to look. Floating not far from the boat was a large black object. It moved slowly, ominously. At first glance it resembled an old shipwreck, but its shape was wrong. Long and wide, broken masts jutting out, yet it didn't sink. It simply floated, swaying with the waves. Pak Roni cocked his rifle, ready in case it was a threat. But then a voice whispered, not from any one direction, but from all around. It seeped in through the wind, threading directly into their minds. Do not return. Do not bring the old soul to the other shore. Everyone froze. Some inmates sat down, whispering prayers. One began to cry, his body trembling uncontrollably. Pacroni insisted they move. The boat finally pulled away from the dock, but its engine sputtered. The mechanic shouted from below. The fuel had leaked. It had been full just this morning. A loud scraping echoed from under the hull. Something was dragging along the bottom of the boat. Everyone went silent, watching as the sea darkened, from blue to brown to pitch black. One prisoner muttered Key Gondo's name repeatedly, as if begging forgiveness for disturbing his rest. Suddenly, the sky was filled with the cries of hundreds of seagulls. But these birds were not normal. They flew low in tight circles above the ferry, surrounding it. Then fog, thick and cold. Within seconds, it swallowed everything. The ocean, the sky, even the deck of their own ship disappeared from sight. Boggers crawled across the floor, whispering the name of God again and again. The boat now seemed to drift between two worlds. All compasses failed. The GPS displayed coordinates that didn't exist on any known map. No one spoke anymore. They only stared, pale and silent. Then, as if parting curtains, the fog opened a path. In the distance, a red light flickered. It wasn't sunlight, nor was it from the ship. It looked like fire, burning deep within a forest. Pacroni raised his binoculars. What he saw made his skin go pale. It was the same island, but there was no dock, no guard posts, nothing, only jungle, and a massive stone gate standing tall by the beach. Ancient Javanese script was carved into the arch faint, but readable, enough to make a few inmates scream. Return him before the seventh night. Pacroni shouted for the ship to turn back, but no one answered. The captain was gone. The steering wheel spun on its own. The boat moved forward, pulled by something unseen, straight toward the stone gate. Panic erupted. One prisoner tried to jump into the sea, but the water had become thick and black, like tar. It pulled him under in seconds. Another screamed, covering his ears, but the scream was echoed, coming back from the direction of the gate itself. When the boat finally docked at the strange shore, the air changed. No sound, no waves, no wind, just stillness. And then, from behind the stone gate, a figure emerged. He was tall. His long white hair brushed the ground. He wore tattered robes and a cloth over his face. In his left hand, he held a staff made from twisted tree roots. His right hand pointed toward them. He said nothing, but everyone understood. They were never meant to come here, and they hadn't seen anything yet. The sky above Nusa Kambangan was still dark as dawn began to creep behind the clouds. The southern sea breeze rustled the trees, carrying a salty, damp scent that seemed to shroud the island in silent whispers. In the underground isolation chamber, Pharaoh stood stiffly before an ancient iron door, barely recognizable. In his hand, he held a strange carved stone recently discovered beneath the hidden altar. The stone felt warm in his palm, as if pulsing with life. When he pressed it against the engraving in the center of the door, a deep rumble echoed from behind the wall. It felt like the heart of the prison itself was beating. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow corridor covered in ancient carvings and torches that lit on their own. Pharaoh held his breath. Behind him, the footsteps of Raka and Bagas followed. At the end of the corridor was a circular chamber. In its center stood a giant statue with glowing red eyes. Around its neck hung an ancient gold amulet shaped like a key. But surrounding the chamber, black shadowy figures began to emerge from the darkness. Not human, not ordinary beings. They stood as if awakened guardians, staring at the three with hollow eyes. Pharaoh knew this was a final trial. To escape the cursed island, they had to retrieve the key without angering the guardians. Baga stepped forward and whispered a prayer his grandfather, a Kiai from Kabuman, had taught him. The prayer echoed in the air like a voice from another age. The being slowly backed away, parting a path toward the statue. Rocco was trembling in awe and fear, but Pharaoh stayed focused. He climbed the pedestal and with trembling hands retrieved the amulet. As the amulet lifted, the room began to quake. Walls cracked. Blinding light shot up from the floor. Sealed corridors opened. The wind howled like ancient cries. A great stone door appeared behind the statue, inscribed with glowing Javanese characters. Without hesitation, the three entered. No time to doubt, no turning back. The passage led to a cold, damp tunnel. After a while, they reached an empty chamber with a single decaying wooden door. When they opened it, the morning sunlight hit their faces. They emerged onto a beach on the island's eastern edge, a place never seen on any map. The sand was soft and black. The sea stretched wide. On the horizon, a fisherman's boat approached. It was time to leave, time to bury every secret. But as they looked back, the island vanished into mist. Hiding once more, waiting for its next visitor, they boarded the fishing boat, pretending to be lost locals. No one knew what they had seen inside, and no one dared ask what had truly happened. But from that day forward, their lives were never the same. A feeling remained deep in their chests that they had witnessed something beyond this world, something vast, something dark. They had stepped into the edge of darkness, into Nusa Kambangan. And for anyone who dares to enter with wicked intent, the island waits, silent, watching. Moral of the story: in life, curiosity and the desire to uncover secrets can lead humans into the deepest parts of darkness. But only with good intentions, courage, and faith in Allah's protection can one escape paths of evil that seem endless. Not every door should be opened. Not every mystery should be solved. There are boundaries set by Allah to keep us from destruction. Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 286, Allah does not burden the soul beyond that it can bear. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever experienced something unexplainable, send blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad and help us spread this meaningful tale by clicking like and subscribe to our channel. If you love your mother, click like and subscribe to this channel.